but the permission is within you to answer the call. And what I love about the nudges and our intuition, even when we have spent years dismissing and ignoring our body and the calls that our body makes to us, that doesn't actually turn fully off. You can rewire. When you start to rewire that system, you can hear yourself louder and louder. The permission is just in you trusting and listening and taking action thereafter.
Welcome to Leadership Rewired, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what leading really takes. No sugarcoating, no jargon, just real conversations, hard-earned insights, and practical wisdom to help you lead through change. Build the cultures that work and stay human while doing it. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Leadership Rewired, the podcast where we spend time talking to amazing people and how do you navigate change, and whether that change be in your work life or in your personal life. I'm Allison Allen, and today's episode, we're going to spend some time talking about a lot of things, but mostly we're going to challenge your definition of what success is and how you get to success. I'm joined by Dr. Taryn Fletcher. She's an award-winning bestselling author and the powerhouse behind the Pivot Accelerator for closet change makers. And by the way, closet change makers is trademarked, so don't try to take it. After reaching the top of her career, Taryn made a very bold and very personal decision. She was faced with something in her family that was life-changing. In 90 days, just 90 days, she was able to make this transformation, make this pivot, and build a six-figure business. And now she's spending all of her time, or a lot of her time, helping high achievers do the same. Welcome, Taryn, to the conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So do you like to be called Taryn or Dr. Taryn? I don't want to disrespect the doctor at all. Like, what's your preference?
Most people call me Dr. Taryn, but truly I answer to Taryn because titles and things, they don't define me. I am proud that I can tack it on.
So I will do my absolute best to do Dr. Taryn, but sometimes it just might come down to Taryn.
Plus, we are on a first name basis.
All right. So let's start with that moment. You were at the top. You were leading an award-winning work in education, and then you made this radical decision to pivot. Can you take us back to that time and share what you think would be helpful for the listeners?
Yeah. You know what? For that time in my life, it was a time when I felt joy and fear really collide intensely. So I don't know if anyone listening has ever felt that, but when you have this excitement in your life happen, but it is happening in a way that you had not planned, or the how all of the things were unfolding really collided with the vision that you had for the way it was supposed to look when it would happen. That's what I was feeling like. At the beginning of this pivot that I was about to make, I had learned that our third baby had Down syndrome. And that was that moment of joy and fear colliding intensively. It was like the world stood still for me. And that was a time when we were excited and very confused about what this meant for our lives. And for me in particular, I struggled deeply with guilt and shame. And all of that was because I was confronted at that moment with the reality that the vision I had for my son had to change. And it wasn't because there was something wrong with him, or it wasn't because he wasn't enough. I had to change my vision because my vision was too small. It was too small. And I know that now, but that wasn't something that came immediately. I was frustrated. And then I realized that I was conditioned with perfection. I was conditioned with the way things should look in the world, as opposed to standing in the presence and the gift that I was being afforded at that time. And so once I was able to meet him, my whole world changed. My whole world changed. I want to fast forward you about 5 years from that point because my son was born 5 years ago. I want to take you to something a little more present day. The first time I saw six figures in my business bank account because of the work that I had done and this idea that purpose and profit, they actually do connect. And I was able to see that. Like, what? This was a dream realized as a business owner. And in just 4.5 years or so, when that was able to happen. And at that same time, I was facing the realization that my marriage was over. And there was a lot of identity facing I had to do at that point too, because there was this identity I had of myself being a wife and that being so much of a success for me. That was an achievement in my world. And now the identity of needing to change the way I saw my future and my family, that also was a time when joy and fear collided. So I just live with this understanding that you can have peace in the midst of a storm. You can be standing in the eye of a storm and have immense peace because when you are willing to allow yourself to live in purpose and feel that alignment, just allow yourself to be in alignment, there can still be a ton of peace moving forward.
I just want to say you have totally destroyed my line of questioning. There is so much. No, in a good way. Oh my God, there's so much in what you said that there's so many paths that we can go down, but I never stick to scripts and I never stick to question things. And I like to go where the flow takes us.
And it's okay because let me tell you, I have never shared that story publicly. I've never shared that most recent pivot of my life. And that's just what I think your gift is, right? Just being able to create this space for someone to be seen. And so here I am. So I do apologize for your line of questioning, but it's because of your gift, because you're standing in your purpose. I felt like I can truly share mine.
Okay, now you're going to make me tear up. I feel truly blessed by those words. And honestly, I do feel that I am finally living in my purpose. And so I feel blessed. I do want to come back to that tension that we can feel when we're living purposefully, at least in our minds, in our personal lives and in our professional lives. And how in some respects that belief that we're living in purpose isn't always actually the purpose that we're supposed to be living. If we bring it to your marriage, that tension of that ideal of what is perfect, right? What we should be doing, that path we should be following. When it gets disrupted, what actions did you take? How did you, and then come out of that with, I need to move into this direction?
So letting go, right? Letting go of that identity that once felt so aligned at one point. Letting go of that is really a pivotal moment in your transformation phase. But just like anything that you have to let go and shed, there's some pain associated. There's some discomfort associated. There's some grief. And so letting go tends to be the place where people are most stuck, right? This is who I am. But in really understanding who you are, you need to assess the conditions in which you originally defined yourself. Titles, accolades, responsibilities that I had decided were things that I wanted, but not necessarily because I wanted them. I wanted what they meant. I wanted the success. I wanted what it stood for. We have to make sure that what we want and who we are in alignment, what we want and how we are deciding to live our lives in our most integrous self. And when there is a kink there or when it is misaligned, it shows up in so many ways.
We probably know and feel that misalignment sooner, almost like when we step into it. When you use the word titles there, I think we make a lot of association with titles and success and what we want in professional, but we don't actually think about those titles and definitions of success when we think about our personal lives. To be a wife, to be someone's partner, there's something about living into that full label that just in the name itself gives some kind of pride or a check to say, we've accomplished this.
Validation. There's a sense of validation that comes with it.
And then yet that thing that and I'm speaking from personal experience, that thing of, okay, now I have this title, I have this position, again, personal or professional. It doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel like the thing that allows me to be fully myself and fully who I am. When you think about like internal messaging or even fears that you may have, did you have to confront anything within yourself to choose yourself?
Yes. I had to give myself permission. And that permission was to acknowledge that I can hear and feel a nudge that I have heard and felt for a while. And I have been looking around to see who is going to let me answer this call. But the permission is within you to answer the call. And what I love about the nudges in our intuition, even when we have spent years dismissing and ignoring our body and the calls that our body makes to us, that doesn't actually turn fully off. You can rewire that entire system. And when you start to rewire that system, you can hear yourself louder and louder. The permission is just in you trusting and listening and taking action thereafter. So yes, I granted myself permission. And a lot of times, the permission that is opening a door of vulnerability to assess all the conditioning that you had been standing in prior to the permission. You have to then go there because you're going to be at a conflict with your permission and the conditioning. I want to do this, but this is what's expected of me. I know I need to move forward. But if I move, what will people think? They'll think I'm losing my mind. So in lies internal tension that each of us have had in a pivot, right? Where we have started to give ourselves permission, but not full permission.
Gosh, your words are just touching me. When you think about your clients and the people that you work with, why is this hard for people?
Limiting beliefs are a big one, right? But they come from so many places. So even though we may be doing the work internally to build ourselves up, maybe we have started to surround ourselves with the people we want to be like, and maybe we are reading the books. But then right outside of that internal space, in your own home, might be someone or something that reminds you of what you may not be able to do right now. That's not how you normally respond to me. I need you to respond like you normally do because that's what I remember about you and that's what I understand. That's our relationship, right? That's our commitment to one another. And so each time you come a little bit further from your internal compass, you are met with a new challenge that requires a new boundary. So you're building and realizing and giving yourself permission all at the same time. There's a lot of discomfort in that. And if you have not learned how to emotionally regulate yourself in those moments and go inward to recognize the emotion that you're sitting with at this time, feel it in the moment, but then set a new intention for how you need to feel. When you haven't done that, when you're met with that barrier or you met with that challenge, sometimes you succumb to it. You just, you're right. Who am I? I don't even know who I think I am. And you literally talk yourself out until you get another moment where you're by yourself. It's a quiet knowing, right? So when you get quiet, you get into a space, you hear yourself again, and then you try to emerge again. It's about being courageous enough and bold enough to take consistent action toward who you say you are. We speak who we are. We don't always be who we are. Does that make sense? We don't always live that, but we are confident mostly in our words. And it's in those moments that we're challenged. And that's when the boundaries are necessary. That's when relationships start to fragment because they were built on a different reality than what is now.
When you think about where you've come from and where you are right now, your story isn't just about career change. You've mentioned it. It's about identity, right?
Yeah.
What would you say are some things that you can share that you learned about yourself in the process of walking away from things that no longer serve you?
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things that I've learned about myself is that I spend a lot of time looking for 6-year-old Taryn, which I think is remarkable because coming from the space of education, right? I'm a trained educator. My focus was primary education. However, I've taught everything and led everything from kindergarten all the way to higher ed. But my original focus was primary education. And I think it's remarkable because I do not believe we give children the credit they deserve. They're very intuitive. Children are very intuitive. They're extremely resilient. And so oftentimes young people will present to us and adults who are quite confused, very conditioned, playing a role a lot of times will tell a child, you don't know who you are.
Right.
And it's on me to tell you who you are. Let me tell you who you are and what you're going to be and how it's going to be. And I live with this juxtaposition because I shared with you that when I learned of a baby growing in my belly, gave that baby a vision. This is who they're going to be. This is how they're going to be in the house. Oh, I can't wait. And so this happens instantly. And we don't do it to shrink our children. We do it out of excitement. We do it out of, but we are small-minded oftentimes when it comes to thinking about who someone else can be. That's not our work. That's really not our lane. So 6-year-old Taryn was a coach. Believe it or not, 6-year-old Taryn was a coach. She would go in school. She was super positive, very social. She would finish her work and then buzz around the classroom to see what everyone else was doing and if they needed something and how she could encourage them or give them some feedback. And guess who didn't like that? Her teachers. Because children, especially girls, should be quiet and reticent, and they should follow all the rules, and they should nod their head, and they should smile. That's how you should be in school. And if you could play that really well, you're going to go really far. So I was already smart. I could get my work done. So I just needed to behave the way they needed me to behave. But when you connect 6-year-old Taryn to Taryn today, she was speaking and socializing and supporting and encouraging for free and doing it well. Taryn speaks and socializes and encourages and engages and helps to transform at premium. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I didn't need reprogramming. I needed encouragement. I needed to be shown how my gifts could be launch pads for my identity moving forward. But it was school or adults or well-meaning people that wanted me to change to fit the conditions of the environment. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's a huge identity shift to realize I knew who I was really early on. And I've spent a lot of time getting to know her again.
It's funny because I think when I left Expedia at the end of 2023, it was the first time in my career that I got an executive coach and started speaking to a therapist. And one of the things my coach, not necessarily my therapist, but realized is she connected me with 8-year-old Allison, which was at a time in my life that I became responsible for a lot of things. And I really wanted to help my mom and do a good job and follow all of the instructions. Hindsight 2020, I can think about her and what she was looking for. What she got was a lot of corrections of things that she could have done better, or lots of feedback. And I never realized how 8-year-old Allison shaped my career and how I moved through the world and even who I am right now. When I think about who I am right now as an entrepreneur, I think I'm more aligned to 8-year-old Allison, more aligned to who she was. And I just think it would be really wonderful if we could figure out a way for adults to lift up and lift out away from their children and really allow them to emerge as these wonderful, amazing human beings that are going to have to deal with things that we won't even know about. And what they will need are the things that they're equipped with at very young ages to be successful. And instead, they're going to be having to unlearn a lot of the things that the adults put on them. And I know this is because I see it now with my college kids. And I just think to myself, goodness, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And I interrupted you and said protection. And I know a lot of what I tried to do with them was really about protecting them. To bring it back to something I really want us to get to, which is you talk a lot about closet change makers, which, by the way, never heard the term until I read your bio and started reading up on you and listened to your TED Talk. And I love it. These are people who are called to do more. And they know it. They're called to do more, but they're stuck in roles. And I've been this person that they no longer fit. What do you think holds most of us back from just pushing through and making things happen?
The roles we play, right? Comfort is there's a cost to comfort, right? Not everyone that I work with is pivoting to become an entrepreneur. Sometimes they're simply pivoting to become more of themselves and still being able to do that in their role. But the role is part of that conditioning, right? And so I think sometimes we become so synonymous with our work, with the expectation, with the responsibility that we begin to lose ourselves in that work. And we begin to think that, oh, wrapped up in this role, wrapped up in this responsibility is supposed to be me and what I also want from this experience. And so I think we forget that's part of it. Or if I'm being honest, for some of us, we went into roles and that was never expected for us to have our wants met in this role, right? There are situations where you walk into something and it was never supposed to be that this was a mutual experience, right? I need you to play a role, serve a responsibility. You bring me outcomes and there's some type of reward compensation at the end. But what you want from this isn't always aligned. Intentional action every single day starts with a knowing of what you want for yourself. And it's one of the hardest questions for clients to answer. And most time, because I work with a lot of women, they haven't even been asked that question before. So they're, wait, what do you mean? No, what do you want? See that?
I'm a big believer that words have power and they definitely invoke things in people. When I first read those words, the first thing I think to myself is that these are people who can see a path for themselves and they're just trying to figure out how to make that happen, versus someone you've got to ask that question to get them to see that they are a change maker. What do you notice in the difference in
Right.
those two people?
So a closet change maker is already a change maker. So there isn't a question around their ability to lead. They're reliable. They're steady. They're the go-to person. They are the quiet storm. When you need something done and you need it done right, you go to the closet change maker. What's a struggle for the closet change maker is that they actually want the respect and the value of their work to be seen.
Mm.
But they are stuck in the mindset that I'm a behind the scenes person though. And I am respected by my colleagues because they come to me for things. They know I'll get the job done, but then they're secretly pissed that they're not being seen for the leader that they are. That's a closet change maker. There's not a question around whether or not they're good at what they do. They could be leading in other spaces. So I think that's probably different between those two people of can I lead and do I lead? There's no question a closet change maker, they know they're a leader. They can see themselves as a leader. They are just not sure how to step out on stage and lead without leaving everything behind and it all falling apart. Again, it's like that tension between giving yourself permission and doing what's expected. What's expected of a closet change maker is to constantly wear the cape.
Yeah.
Someone who is a true change maker leading their life and their organization, they have CEO energy. So they are constantly looking at the return on investment. They are constantly looking at how they can delegate and do their most highest genius work. Those are two very different kinds of leaders. One, the closet change maker, is in love with exhaustion and feels like that's a badge of honor. Where a CEO energy, leading your life and your organizations with the confidence of someone who knows their worth and their value, that person leads very differently.
Okay, you create a pivot with the goal to get people to move from stuck to actual purposeful living. Can you walk us through the framework, even just to give people a taste of what's there?
Yes. So first off, in Pivot Accelerator, the goal is for you to be able to come together with a like-minded community, get clarity on your next level in the first 30 days. And it's really important to do that identity work up front because you can imagine how many times you're confronted with identity when taking bold weekly action. So each time you take a new step, you are needing to assess, am I making a decision based on the old version of me or the new version of me? Because it's not as if we've abandoned one and completely taken on the version of another. We're shedding. We're in a process of shedding, which takes some time. So in this container, we want to get that immediate identity shift so that you can begin to question your conditioning along the way. And so that framework of getting to that clarity in the first 30 days is all around centering your purpose, identifying what it looks like to live in integrity, and accepting the vulnerability that comes with questioning your conditioning. So in that first 30 days, we're intensely working through that, defining your purpose, defining what it looks like to walk in integrity, if this is your purpose, and then realizing that vulnerability and questioning that conditioning is a part of this process. And once we get through that process, we can then begin to take bold action toward our future self.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's when ownership of this identity comes in. What would my future self actually do? How would they think, behave, and be? What would it feel like if this were something I was actually wanting to get as a goal? What would it look like for me to go after this new role? Or what would it look like for me to start this consulting agency? Whatever the case may be, we own that identity in a different way. And that weekly bold action is constantly supporting that future self identity. And as we're transitioning, we're implementing that pivot plan that we put together along the way. The pivot framework is actually based on the word pivot. So we want our clients to make changes very immediately because we want them to have that gratification of knowing you can do this, right? So we want them to gain clarity in their first 30 days. And the way they do that is going through our pivot framework. So first things first is aligning with your purpose and defining what it is that you want. And then thinking about, okay, if I know what I want, if I have a clear purpose, I have a clear vision for myself, what does it look like to walk in integrity, which is the I of the framework? What does it look like to stand and walk in integrity of this new vision that I have for myself based on all the things that I know I want for myself? So it's this beautiful opportunity to really, for the first time as a leader, think about what you need. Finally get what you need. And I know as a leader myself, I was always thinking about others. What does my team need? What does the community need? How can I best support them? How is the mission supporting them? But what did I need? That wasn't often a question. So we're really getting into this space of going inward, right? And so as we go inward, we're thinking about our purpose. We're looking deeply at what it looks like to walk in that integrity. We are needing to confront vulnerability because it comes with questioning the conditioning that got us where we are and shedding that conditioning so we can be our future self. It is our first 30 days.
Have you thought about this framework having further application for people who are at that sort of critical moment of career change or even personal life change?
Absolutely. I've thought about this framework for emerging post-secondary students where you're just coming out of high school and there's a lot of expectation from your family on who you should become, right?
Yes.
I also think even after the formative years. So when you think about all the growth that takes place between birth and 5 years old, right? There's so many things in our environment that we're learning and it's forming and shaping our identity. And then right when we feel like we are having that sense of independence, we're defining some things for ourselves. We often have parents, well-meaning, protective, important people in our life come in to tell us, you can't actually do that. And here's why. You can't become that. And here's why. It happens around 8 or 9 years old. And middle schoolers are so unique because their brains are developing at the same rapid speed as when you're an infant emerging into a 5-year-old, but your body is not changing at that rapid speed. So we don't always acknowledge all of the brain development that's happening as an adolescent or a preteen going into adolescence. And so I say that to say there's a lot of thinking and formation that's happening in their lives, and they're thinking about who they want to become. And again, well-meaning adults are helping to narrow that path, whittle it down. And so I think about the implementation of being able to think about what you want, think about what it looks like to stand in integrity, and realizing some of the natural vulnerabilities that come with you wanting to show up as that person.
I just see such further application. So I know you probably are in your business plan have that thinking about. When you think about building something meaningful from scratch, you built a 6-figure business. Let's talk clarity, energy, and reality checks. What should people think about as they're building anything that is new and innovative or something that just requires new thinking?
I like to start from the thought of who do I want to serve?
Mm.
And I often push that thought on who should this serve? Because we have an opportunity, whether we're inside organizations or building something on our own, we have an opportunity to make the world a better place. I just feel like that is the mission, right? For each and every one of us. But I also believe that most people are thinking about the future of who it could benefit, how it could become. And so I like to think of what, again, goes back to the purpose. What's the purpose of the work that you want to do? Who do you want to serve? Why do you want to serve them? What do you want them to be able to experience that is different and better than what they're currently experiencing? I think are just great questions, whether you're inside of an organization or on your own. And to go back to the connection between kids, it's so interesting how I think tech is really pushing us to think about creativity and collaboration and the empathy behind the algorithms and all the soft skills around the work. They're pushing us to think about this. But children actually do a lot of that really well.
Really well.
I was at a college orientation. My oldest is going to college, and there was this great presenter around AI, and they're giving the students all the tools. And they constantly talked about how the jobs that my children will have, our children will have, aren't created yet. And so you have to be creative and intuitive, and you have to be listening to yourself, and you have to be listening to the community. Unfortunately, many of the institutions and the organizations that we have grown up through, including our children, chip at that every single day.
Every single day. Every
Right?
single day. Every
And it's
single
like,
day.
ooh,
Yeah.
let's fix that. I'll give a shout out to Montessori schools. I don't think all Montessori schools are one and the same, because Montessori philosophy is implemented by humans, right? And the philosophy is watered down based on who is at the helm of the org. But I do think the philosophy in itself is very intentional about helping a young person learn who they are, dream up what it is that they're passionate about, and implement that until they're exhausted by it. And they've learned something new about themselves to apply it to a new thing until they are exhausted about it. I think Montessori does a great job at that. But I would really love for organizations to be thinking up solutions that don't stifle the very thing that we're looking for in the future.
Yes. +1. It's an interesting thing being in corporate America. We're often talking about how do we make you more innovative? How do we make you more creative? And your performance review, you get you're too creative, you're innovating too much. So it's this constant sort of conflict that exists. Last question. You often talk about legacy-minded leadership, which, by the way, again, love. For those still striving to survive, that may sound like something that's so far from them, so disconnected from who they are and what they can be. What does legacy really mean to you, and why should it matter to people, and why should it matter now?
We are all going to leave this earth at some point, right? And I think when I think about legacy, I just think about how you want to be remembered. And I know that may sound very like trivial, and everybody says it, and it's probably in a ton of graduation cards. But the truth is, when we do think about that and we connect ourselves to the fact that someone is going to remember what how we've made them feel or the way in which we moved about the world, there is a sense of consciousness and self-awareness that becomes illuminated in those moments. And we actually start to think about behavior differently. We actually start to be more mindful. And so that's what legacy means to me, is how can we live our life more present in a way that we are conscious of the behaviors. We are conscious of how we're showing up. We're not shrinking in spaces just to simply fit in because that's what we've been told to do. But we're thinking about the fact that someone's watching us, maybe our daughter, maybe our son, maybe our neighbor who's watching us and wondering, how am I supposed to do it? And I see this great leader doing it this way, but that's in such tension with who I believe I should. I don't feel like I should actually just fold in this moment. But when you're conscious, when you're present, you start to become quite creative and quite aware of all the different ways you could be doing something differently right now. And so that's legacy to me.
Often we associate even the word legacy with something bigger and outside of ourselves. And I love when you said some child, some person is watching you, where that person's like a neighbor who passes you because they see you working in your yard, doing something every single weekend. You never know who is taking in the fullness of you and how that's impacting their lives. We associate legacy with bigness and money or something that's built in a product, when in fact it could be something so small. Dr. Taryn, this has been the biggest gift to me to launch the second season of this podcast with you in that seat talking to me. It's been very rich and engaging for me, and I get lost in your words myself. So something I'm trying to practice and be better about. Your honesty and your clarity around this space, I think, has just brought our listeners a new frame. That's part of what Leadership Rewired is. It's thinking about what are the new frames in which we can think about how we show up as leaders, and how do we step back and give ourselves permission to think about or come at a problem in a very different way.
I do call myself the pivot queen, and change is maybe a bit more easier for me to stomach than others. But guess what? I go through my own framework on a daily basis. I have to check in with my own integrity often. I have to be vulnerable and question conditioning every single day. I have children who are watching me too. I allowed myself to be brave in your space, and it was the perfect space for me to do that in. So thank you.
Thank you. How can people find you? How can people get in touch? How can people learn more about the Pivot Framework?
Yes, I want everyone to know that they too can be brave enough to pivot. So I put together a private podcast. It's quite intimate. I definitely share some stories that some of my clients don't even have access to. And I want to give that as a gift to your audience. You can go right to drtaryn.co/clarity. You can grab that private podcast. And from that point on, we can definitely connect. And if you're on LinkedIn, you can find me at drtaryn.co.
I will make sure that all of Dr. Taryn's information is in the show notes, in the bios of this podcast. I just want to thank Dr. Taryn for being here on this podcast. I appreciate you showing your whole self and sharing with the audience a different way to think about change in their lives and giving, quite frankly, permission. We do talk about this a lot on the podcast, but giving people permission to just take a moment to step back, be a little bit vulnerable with yourself, and rethink about how you can move forward. And don't forget, choosing yourself isn't something that you have to feel guilty about. It's actually something you need to do in order to be the most effective leader. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Leadership Rewired with Allison Allen. If today's episode hit home, share it with a leader who needs it. And if you want more truth talk leadership insights, subscribe wherever you listen, follow me on LinkedIn, and keep leading with clarity, even when it's hard. See you next time.